Want to keep your dollars and cents? Then download the Sense app from the Office of Financial Readiness. That's Sense, S-E-N, money sign, E, to save for retirement, build credit, create a spending plan, or buying a home. You can't do any of those things without money. So if you have sense, you'll download the Sense app. That's S-E-N, money sign, E, today. And be sure to follow at DoD FinRed on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And welcome to the Back Brief. I'm Rod Rodriguez. I've got here Jack Murphy. Jack, thanks for doing another one of these stories on China, man.
Hey, yeah, I'm happy to do it. I mean, it's really a pleasure to be able to talk to some of these experts.
So we're in part 2 of the Future War series on China. And I think it's interesting because one of the reasons we are focused on China, Russia, looking at big force-on-force, potential force-on-force, conventional military engagements is because we are wrapping up the war on terror, as if you will. Not necessarily saying the war on terror is over, but certainly the war on terror is changing with the closure of Afghanistan and our real hands-off approach to Iraq. Before we jump into China, I do want to address the 500-pound gorilla in the room, and that is Afghanistan. It is all over the headlines right now. It is the talk of the town, talk of the nation. We have all seen the footage of the Chinook dangling precariously close to the roof of an embassy, reminiscent of that same situation in Saigon during the Vietnam era. Jack, as a special forces guy who's been there in that region, done that, what are your feelings towards Afghanistan, seeing these images on the news and seeing the plight of the Afghan people as they race down, trying to hold on to the side of a C-130? What were your thoughts as this week has unfolded?
It's tragic. Excuse me. It's tragic. Transcending right into catastrophe. This is not the orderly withdrawal that we were promised by the Biden administration. Things have clearly come unhinged. I have had some conversations with people. Apparently, some of the intelligence assessments predicted that the government would be able to hold out at least until October. And they instead lasted a few weeks. What are we looking at? 2 weeks at this point? To be clear, the difference we're talking about here is really an issue of timing and what is convenient for the United States government. It's not a question of what the end state would be. This was going to happen regardless. I don't think anyone is really even pretending otherwise. It was just a question of how orderly would this withdrawal be? Would we have time to get out all the interpreters and the other people who are being granted special visas to evacuate from Afghanistan? Clearly, that did not happen the way our government had planned. And now we're looking at, a full-blown humanitarian crisis. Other than that, I mean, there's going to be a lot of opinions. There's going to be a lot of blame game. I'm just going to point out right now, I mean, I talked to men who are in their 70s who are still trying to wrap their minds around what they experienced in Vietnam. And this is a experience that veterans of our generation are going to carry with them for the rest of their lives. And they're going to try to piece together and try to understand for the rest of their lives. So for all you guys out there, I mean, don't beat yourselves up too bad. Don't beat up your teammates and your buddies too bad. There's a lot of blame to go around, and we'll all be pointing fingers at each other for a long time. Just understand, if you're some corporal that served in the Marine Corps, like what's happening today isn't your fault. But that doesn't mean that it's not traumatic, right? We're watching, it's like the erasure of 20 years of history. Like the war didn't happen, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been struggling with this as we've seen this all unfold. The thing that I've had the most trouble with is reconciling my own career. 20 years. I joined the Army back in 2000. A year later, 9/11, and my world changed. We've been fighting this war for 20 years. My entire military career has been spent studying and fighting Saddam, the Al Qaeda, ISIS, the Taliban, the Haqqani network. 20 years later, we have nothing to show for it. I have nothing to show for it. An entire military career of 2 failed wars. And I challenge anybody to tell me that Iraq wasn't a failed war. I mean, it wasn't as hasty of a withdrawal as we did in Afghanistan, but the results were the same. We left, the bad guys took over. We had to go back and kill more bad guys, but at the expense of thousands of lives, billions of dollars, trillions of dollars lost. I don't think we're going to go back to Afghanistan the way we did to go rescue the people of Mosul, to go and help the Iraqi army fight. I think it's 2 different animals. I don't think there will be an Afghan army to fight the Taliban. It's over. I think that one is it's done.
Well, as I guess both as a journalist and also just as a person or as a veteran, I'm oscillating between these 2 points of view. I mean, on one hand, I'm trying not to be too harsh because I know there are people out there, both all around, there are military veterans who are struggling to process this, and also people in Afghanistan who have to live there and are like suffering in a very like profound way. But at the same time, maybe like we need to hear the hard truth. We need to talk about that hard truth. We need to analyze that. And I mean, in a perfect world, learn from it and not put our kids and our grandkids through the same mistakes that we seem to do over and over again. But I feel sometimes like I'm telling people that Santa Claus isn't real, right? When you say that 2 failed wars, like it's like it never happened. What is it? I'm getting text messages and emails like it's crazy right now. And, people saying exactly that. None of it mattered. None of it mattered.
Yeah.
And, me, I left, as one friend of mine told me, I left at the halftime show. I left in 2010, kind of saw where things were going, didn't like what I was seeing. And I left the military because of that. But that, doesn't change the fact that all of us are invested in the war in different ways. And there are other folks like yourself, Rod, people who spent 20 or more years and invested a significant portion of their adult life in Afghanistan and the future of that country. And now every single guy who did that, who worked over there, is having to ask themselves some really hard questions. And, those questions aren't going away and the answers aren't going to be easy.
Yeah. You touched on something, and that is, our children inheriting these wars. And I saw some articles at a couple of other veteran news publications where it's like, it's supposed to be a feel-good article about a mom and a son meeting in Afghanistan, and a father and his kid serving together. And I'm like, that's not a happy story. That's not a feel-good story. That's failure. That's failure incarnate. That is us not being able to win a war, to put a kibosh to something, to the point that you're serving alongside your kids at the FOB you built 10 years ago, 15. I found no joy in those articles. It brought me sadness because I've got a son right now who's an infantryman. I got another one that's leaving to basic training on Sunday. He's going to the Marine Corps. How insane and sick is it that we could serve together in the same war I fought 15 years ago? It's insane. And this is another part of the question that we're all having is, on one end, we feel bad for the Afghan people. We see the footage of them holding on to the C-130. We know that the Taliban is going to just crush them. On the other hand, what can we do in the next year that we couldn't do in 20? What can we, how many more people have to go into the meat grinder before anything gets done? We expect them to do something for themselves. It's just not happening. that's the quandary I think a lot of us find ourselves in, is like, we want an answer. We want to know what could we have done differently, and nobody has any clue.
It's been quite interesting, I think. As horrid a website as Twitter is, it's very interesting to watch because it offers an insight into some people's thought process. And you're seeing America's elite class have a meltdown this week, like an absolute meltdown, because they're so humiliated that all of their expertise counted for nothing. This is just a humiliating failure for them. And it's amazing that even as we see what's going on in Afghanistan, to see them double and triple down on it and say, we should have stayed there. America shouldered a small cost to stay in Afghanistan. Afghanistan offered us a platform to project ourselves into the rest of the region. All of these things, all these rationalizations of like why it was okay, and making it sound like we were at an affordable stalemate that was sustainable with the Taliban, which is absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I mean, there were all kinds of districts that had already fallen to the Taliban before this. And the position we were in, is this story I've been working on for a while, shows, I mean, we waged a sort of, I'm struggling to even put words to it. The type of war we were fighting in Afghanistan in those twilight years was a war of nihilism, where we were just trying to kill as many people as we could, like try to attrit the enemy. And that, yes, that wore them down a bit, but all of that was so that we could negotiate our exit in Doha. It was to negotiate our exit out of Afghanistan. We were not ever going to be able to maintain that type of military action in Afghanistan indefinitely. It was a temporary thing. And even then, our presence in Afghanistan was very much contested by the Taliban. So just watching these people at these like think tanks in Washington, D.C. have these like emotional tirades about us leaving Afghanistan and why we should have stayed, it just really, to me, jumps out at me, this like profound disconnect between what's going on in Washington, D.C. and what's going on the ground in places like Afghanistan. I mean, these people are just completely disconnected from the realities that our soldiers deal with, the risks they take, the fact that some of them come home in body bags and their families have to deal with the aftermath. Like none of that even seems to register with them, which is beyond bizarre.
I think we also have a new problem. Afghanistan and Iraq we've had this problem forever, and this probably why so much has gone wrong, is that we do not, and still have not, clarified the standard for victory.
Yeah.
What is a win? How do you know when you've won a war? We're talking about China in these last two episodes. Afghanistan has given me pause to wonder, well, okay, let's suppose China's like, hey, you know what, Taiwan, you're ours now. And America, you can suck it. They put up their naval blockade. They're like, go ahead, come, let's, you know what? We feel frisky. Let's dance. Okay. So we dance. Well, then what? How do you know you've beat them? Is it when we capture Taiwan? Is it holding Taiwan? Is it invading mainland China? Is it when we've conquered the country? How do you know when you've won a war? I don't have a clear explanation. I don't have a definition for that.
Well, I mean, in a question like Taiwan, I mean, I think it's a lot clearer. I mean, that obviously it would be to expel China from Taiwan shores if that happened, and put enough pressure on China that they're forced into some sort of negotiated settlement, in that circumstance. In Afghanistan, again, like you said, what were we trying to accomplish there? And it was never clearly articulated to the public from my point of view. I'm not aware of like an NDAA or some other document that shows like, here are the things we're trying to accomplish in Afghanistan. 1, 2, 3. Once they're accomplished, we're out of there. I never saw anything like, I mean, certainly our government did a horrible job at articulating this to the American public, probably because they didn't have an answer. So the impression becomes like we're just going to stay in Afghanistan until they have a modern, secular, sustainable democracy and business friendly government. Which is something that was like probably never going to happen, not on any timeline that is relevant to our lives, right? Right. That's a multi-generational, not just a war, but it's social engineering. And if that's what we're trying to do over there, then we do need to articulate that to our voting and tax-paying public, and we never did.
See, I disagree with you in the idea that Taiwan would be clear and cut. We would know that, expel the Chinese and we hold the island and force them into some type of negotiation. I think prior to seeing the way we've handled Afghanistan, maybe I would have accepted that. Like, oh, that seems reasonable. But the idea behind Afghanistan was to go in, destroy Taliban training camps, provide no quarter for Al-Qaeda to train there, kill Osama bin Laden. And that's what I was sold on. That's what I think the American public was sold on. There was no mention of nation building. There was really no talking about like, we're going to liberate the Afghans. We're going to do this. This was people might have forgotten that OEF was a revenge operation. You bombed our towers. We're going to kill your Al-Qaeda training camps, and we're going to hunt down Osama bin Laden like a dog and shoot him in the face. Turns out the guys who bombed us were from Saudi Arabia, and Osama bin Laden was hiding in Pakistan. So little to do with everything else. My issue with China, the line I draw between China and Afghanistan is simply this. It seems like the logical course would be retake the island, force these guys in negotiation. The logical course for Afghanistan was destroy the training camps, kill Osama bin Laden, call it a day. I don't know if we're capable of creating a goal, reaching the goal, and then packing it up and saying mission accomplished. I don't know if we're capable of that.
Well, I mean, these are imperfect comparisons I'm about to make, but like in regards to Taiwan, we can look at the American capture of Grenada or the British capture of the Falklands Islands. You can see how that could play out as a limited military campaign, as opposed to like an unending military commitment, that we're going to be there forever. I think Afghanistan was just so much more complicated at least in that sense.
Do you find so we in your earlier in this conversation you alluded to these intelligence analysts, think tanks that were like, oh, they'll hold them off till October, it'll be great, it'll be fine, there'll be issues, but we'll be able to do this. I thought it was interesting. I saw again at another veteran online media source, there were two stories. One was headlined, U.S. will conduct airstrikes against Taliban. Literally, the story next to it was U.S. not committed to killing or not committed to airstrikes in Taliban. I'm like, wait a minute. These are literally two different stories. If our analysts got it so wrong, and I'm speaking as an intelligence professional here, there's a huge difference between a couple of months and 2 freaking weeks. That is, in my opinion, a huge intelligence failure if that's how it was sold to our commanders, to our president. If that's what happened, and again, Jack and I are not sitting in skiffs right now getting the president's daily, but if that's how it was presented, and if that's what went down, the American people deserve some serious answers, because it's probably those same idiots who gave such a poor intelligence assessment that have led us to believe that Afghanistan was doing okay to begin with.
Right. I absolutely agree. And I mean, if that is indeed what the 17 intelligence agencies briefed to the president, that, the government's going to hold out this long. I mean, I've said before, any private or, who served in the Army or the Marine Corps could tell you that the ANA would collapse. I mean, maybe not quite this quickly, but I mean, if you're like completely shocked that this is happening right now, I don't know what to say. So that these intelligence agencies, if they did give that assessment, I mean, that's like criminally negligent. Heads should roll for that.
So when we talk about China, we're talking about, in this last episode, we were talking a lot about some of the corporate aspects to this, some of the business intelligence that they're conducting in regards to how China is dominating that intelligence collection piece against us, against, our stopping us from collecting on them. What was your biggest takeaway from that interview? And where, again, in light of Afghanistan, in light of Iraq, in light of current events, and in light of recent events, where do you think China intelligence sits now in our priorities list?
Well, I think Chinese intelligence, Chinese espionage directed against the United States has to sit pretty high up, especially as we move into this era, whatever buzzwords you want to use, great power competition, a Cold War with China, that espionage conflict or concern is going to escalate dramatically, I think, in the coming decades. And it's already quite serious. But I think the biggest takeaway, I think that conversation with Matthew Brazil was that he kind of peeled away the mysticism and the mythologies around Chinese espionage, pointing out that it's very serious, but it's also not quite the boogeyman that some Western analysts build it up to be. They build it up to be something like this very like mysterious, with all this like grains of sand and all this other sort of weird stuff. And he's like, well, they employ fairly traditional espionage tradecraft. And sometimes their intelligence successes may not be indicative of them being very talented intelligence officers, but rather us, being asleep at the wheel. So I think that's one of the big things I took away from that interview.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that demystification, if you will. I think that's important to have realistic expectations and a realistic image of your enemy or your potential enemy, because if you push them up to, if you gas them up too much, you're not preparing for the right things. This is where a lot of times I think the intelligence community loses some of the fundamentals, because they start chasing ghosts. They start chasing things that don't exist necessarily. It just seems cool on paper because, you get to rile up, you get to rattle the cages a little bit, and people go, oh my God, what's going on here? I am very interested now in this third part of the China series. This is where we start getting into like some of those, we're going to start G2ing this scenario, essentially. Can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect from episode 3?
Yeah, in part 3, I interviewed Dr. Roger Cliff, who has studied the subject of, the Chinese military and what a conflict with China, between China and the United States, would look like if it played out. And he was one of the authors of a big study for the Rand Corporation. So I really kind of get into like the details with him in that interview. Particularly focused around that conflict being over Taiwan, how that conflict could start, what that kind of battle might look like, and how it could possibly come to some sort of resolution. So yeah, it was an interesting conversation, to say the least.
So right before we press the record button, Jack and I were having an offline discussion about this next episode, and it has a lot to do with what's going on right now. As we opened the show up talking about Afghanistan because it is a very important topic that is on the minds of everyone. And prior to the withdrawal and prior to this, I think debacle is a good word. I think it accurately describes.
I have some other words. I don't know if you could publish them though.
I think our editor, Brian, would have a field day with that. But I will go on a limb and call it a somewhat thing of a debacle. So with that in mind, we were working on another story about Afghanistan, specifically about an incident in Kunduz.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to flip them. So we'll do the Kunduz show next, and then we'll go to part 3 on China. The Afghanistan episode is a interview I conducted with Joshua Middleton, who was a special forces medic, and he was present for the battle in 2015 when the Taliban took over the city. And basically it was his ODA plussed up with a few other guys. So maybe like an ODA and a half, launching, I mean, quite frankly, this like epic, heroic effort to retake the town, retake the city with their Afghan commandos. They had some guys. And I mean, it's just an absolutely wild story. And a lot of the things that have played out this week, you can see, I mean, again, they should not be surprising. That these Afghan soldiers would not fight against the Taliban without American support is one of the things that comes out of this interview and out of this story very quickly. And so you guys will see when we get the episode up. So again, the things that are surprising to Washington, D.C. and many other people who should know better was no surprise at all for anyone who actually served in Afghanistan. Again, there's just a really profound disconnect there.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have this episode come out probably next week. It is very relevant to what's happening right now, and I think it will add some much needed context to the conversation that we're all having across the social media spaces, whether it's Twitter, Facebook. There's a lot of folks with opinions who have never served. I'm not going to bash them. You don't have to have done the work to know a little bit about it. You can have your opinions. I think that this episode about the Kunduz fight is going to be very relevant, very interesting. So as soon as we release that, we will come back, finish up our Future War series on China. We have other Future War series topics in mind. Russia, the digital cyber warfare space. There's a lot we need to talk about.
I have a interview scheduled this Wednesday with Eric Kurlander, who's the author of Hitler's Monsters. I'm almost done with his book. And so he's an academic, did a lot of research for this book, and it's about the Nazis' obsession with the occult. And it's a fascinating book. So that'll make it for an interesting episode coming up.
It'll definitely help break up the this depressing couple of weeks.
Switch it up a little bit.
We got to switch it up for you folks. And you know, I do want to say something on a serious note about that. And Jack touched on it earlier. If you're listening to the show, you're probably a veteran or a service member, or you're a family member of one. And we greatly appreciate your support. This is, and I don't want to jump into a goodwill hunting. This, you know, it's not your fault. It's
some
not your
party. Yeah.
But it really isn't. Listen, Jack's 100% right. There's a lot of blame to throw around. I don't think it is any service member's responsibility to win this war. A lot of us did what we were told to do, when we were told to do it, how we were told to do it. We didn't always agree, and some of us made our decisions to truck on. Some of us got off the boat and did other things. Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I just wanted to point out, I mean, this sucks to say, but it's not all about us. It's not all about Jack and Rod and you know, our teammates. If you look at what happened in Afghanistan this week, you had like entire units just lay down their arms without firing a shot. Now, if you served as an American soldier, what if you fought a little bit harder? What if we had been a little bit smarter? What if we had trained the Afghan military better or differently, or made some different decisions? What if we showed more wisdom in how we prosecuted this counterinsurgency campaign? I mean, we could have done all of those things. I think we made a lot of mistakes and we did a lot of stupid things over there. But at the same time, we did also make a pretty earnest effort to build the Afghan military. But the fact that so many of them surrendered without firing a shot and just let this happen, just let the Taliban supplant them, almost like they did a relief in place, like it was just a unit handover. That tells you that it doesn't matter how hard you fought as a squad leader in the 82nd or how well you trained the Afghan military as a lance corporal in the Marines. Like, and this is also painful to say, but like, it didn't really matter. It really didn't. And that's a hard thing to swallow as well. But I guess the larger point I want to make there is like, this isn't all on you. You know, it's not all on Rod and Jack, and it's not all on, you know, our fellow veterans out there who made an earnest and honorable attempt to help the Afghan people.
So with that said, listen, we all lost people out there. It sucks. I don't have a more eloquent way to put that. It does suck. You might be feeling the pressure of this thing. Folks, please, for the love of God, get help, talk to somebody, call your friend, call your battle buddy, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's 1-800-273-8255. Again, the number is 1-800-273-8255. This is it's tough. And I was talking about this with my own family. I said, this is a tough pill for me to swallow. I've been feeling down. I've been feeling sad. I see the news and it's just like, oh Christ, man, are we serious? I think the thing that broke my heart the most was watching them hold on to the side of the C-130. And I saw the follow-up video of a person falling from the sky.
Yeah.
That's tough,
it's
man.
Brutal. Well, I would just again just point out to guys out there. I mean, take it in stride, because this is a question that like is going to stick with us for the rest of our lives. Like, we're not going to resolve these things for ourselves internally this week or next week, or it's going to take years. But also keep in mind that like your life has value outside of the military and outside of this conflict in Afghanistan. There is a whole America out there for you after service. After you complete your military service, there are all sorts of things you can go and do. And the American public loves you for your service by and large. They love veterans, and they love being around you, and they love having you come and work for them. So, I mean, this sucks, but also don't let it be your entire life. There is a whole other life out there for you guys if you want it.
100%. And if you want to reach out to me, you can. militarymatters@stripes.com. Shoot me an email. Tell me what you think. We're always interested in finding new ideas for new shows, new topics, new tips, all that good stuff. You can follow Jack on Twitter at Jack Murphy RGR. And that's on Twitter. And you can find me at Rod. Jack, do you have anything else before we hit the road?
I guess only my own podcast, The Team House. If you check it out on YouTube, we did an interview with Tony Brooks, who was a Ranger, served in Afghanistan, and was part of the recovery effort for Operation Red Wings, and the soldiers who perished in the Turbine 33 crash. So speaking of Afghanistan, you guys might find that interesting. Tony's a really good guy.
Awesome. And you can also find me on Connecting Vets. I do a show called The Back Brief, and I kind of laid my thoughts out on this Afghanistan situation and a little more details, but always anxious and happy to hear everyone's feedback. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Hit that subscribe button, folks. Listen, we are growing through word of mouth. We need your support. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're available on all the platforms. We're even on YouTube, folks. We're on YouTube. You can go listen to this. If you're working in a government section or whatever, secret classified skiff, the general loves his YouTube. He's not going to ban that one. So we're there too. All right, folks, I'm Rod Rodriguez. That was Jack Murphy, and we will see you guys later. Are you a military spouse? MilSpouse Money Mission educates and empowers those whom service members rely on most. So if you're the household 6, captain of the homestead, leader of the domicile, check out MilSpouse Money Mission from the Office of Financial Readiness. Also, they have an app, Sense app, SEN money sign E, to save for retirement, build credit, create a spending plan, or buying a home. If the last year taught us anything, it was how important it is to save for a rainy day or a COVID year. So if you have any sense, you'll download the Sense app. That's SEN money sign E today. And be sure to follow at DoD FinRed on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.